All right, get in here. It's the day where we talk about the big stories of the week. There's a new pope. I'm fascinated by the pop culture dimensions of that story because it kind of played out in a very similar way to like a reality show finale. We have a lot to cover. You know the drill. The group chat is here. Let's go. I'm Elamin Abdul-Mahmoud, and this is Commotion. Okay, I just want to dive right in. The group chat is right here. Jackson Weaver is back on the show. Angela Moretta is back on the show. And for the first time on Commotion, Ellen O'Connell-Wittett is here. Hello to all of you. Welcome to the show.
Hello.
Hello.
Hi,
It's nice to have you. This is nice. Okay, listen, there's no bigger story on the planet than the new pope right now. An American pope, Robert Prevost, is now Pope Leo XIV. It was the first conclave in more than a decade, and I think it's fair to say that the vibe of this one felt a little bit different.
I'm everyone's favorite, and I'm not surprised. Don't cross me, I know all the secrets. Biden didn't scare me, so why would you? I pray properly, and the way you pray, well, that's a choice. Holier than thou? Please. I make holy look effortless.
That is the Real House Cardinals of Vatican City. There were just so many conclave-themed videos on TikTok this week that for a minute there, it transformed from this, centuries-old religious ceremony into basically a Bravo reality show. Angela, I'm going to start with you on this one. This is the first conclave of the TikTok era. Are you surprised that TikTok took such an intense interest in it?
I'm not really surprised. I think it plays into the Gen Z memeing of a lot of recent contests, whether it's like turning Kamala is Brat into a reality competition series or sort of the intense fandoms for specific RuPaul's Drag Race contestants or Eurovision singers. Like, it all kind of feels part of the same world to me. It also reminds me, I think, of the memes that took off a few months ago when Conclave came out, where you had these tributes to the middle-aged Italian nationalist vaping cardinal who's always giving his snarky little side eye. Like, of all of the people to take off from that movie, it struck me as funny that was the cardinal that really got TikTok's attention. I think it's kind of the same thing here, right? Only this time it's like, check out Tagle singing karaoke, or this meme of pizza balla turning into a pizza. I think it's very TikTok, right? That these personal attachments are kind of incongruous with what you'd expect of stan culture, right? You wouldn't necessarily predict a bunch of men dressed like wizards to capture Gen Z's attention, but maybe the unexpectedness is part of the appeal, right? There's something kind of shadowy and mysterious about the conclave and its rituals and about the machinations of the Catholic Church, even though obviously Francis made some inroads with younger generations in recent years. So I'm not surprised, right, that kind of became the object of attachment for TikTokers.
Okay, but the thing that just stuck out for me, Angelo, is the thing that you just did there, which is like you named two cardinals who were in the running to become pope, as though they're like, well, one of them will get the final rose. And like, I don't get to use this expression very often, Ellen, but like, is nothing sacred, right? Because like you recently wrote about this in the cut. When did you start noticing that like this particular conclave was becoming this big social media obsession? And what kind of content did we end up seeing in terms of that obsession?
Yeah, in the last conclave, I think Instagram had been around for 1 year. There was one little Twitter account that was making fun of that seagull that perched on the chimney. It was called Sistine Seagull.
I remember that seagull well. Yes.
Yeah. It was such a simple time to just have one little Twitter account. But I went to Catholic school through 12th grade. I write a lot of sort of irreverent things about the Catholic Church that irreverent sort of in a gentle way. But I think that people started sending me these memes because they knew that it would be something that I would be interested with. There was something with like people making Rice Krispie treats with consecrated or unconsecrated Eucharistic wafers. Like, get your conclave snacks ready, gather around the laptop or your phone. Yeah. And I noticed over and over that people were really trying to make this a reality TV spectacle, which is interesting because there's this juxtaposition. There's something so ritualistic and sacred and secretive, as Angelo said, about the conclave. And the internet just sort of can't stand for that. We have to fill the void in some way. So we filled the void with our memes and with our silly jokes about it. You know, they're literally, these cardinals are locked in there with key. You know, that's what conclave means. So yeah, we just sort of couldn't stand it. And it's really interesting to watch internet culture respond to like the last black box, is how I described it in my piece in The Cut. In our culture. Shortly after Francis died, I just saw people getting really invested in who came next. And I just thought that was so interesting, because I don't think of that many people online, and especially Gen Z, being that interested in the Catholic Church. And I don't think it's the church they're interested in. I think it's the mystery of it all.
Yeah, I have to say that if the memes would have happened anyway, they certainly were aided by the existence of this movie.
Our faith is a living thing precisely because it walks hand in hand with doubt. If there was only certainty and no doubt, there would be no mystery, and therefore no need for faith.
That's Ralph Fiennes. Ralph Fiennes in the movie Conclave. That is a movie that won an Oscar. That is a movie that has landed in possibly the best time you could possibly hope to land if you make a movie about a conclave. Jackson, how has this movie kind of changed the public interest, would you say, in the current real-life conclave?
I mean, I think there's many reasons why we're more interested in this conclave than past ones. You do get, like, you know, a little bit of a return to conservatism as things swing a little bit back from where they were in my youth. But you can't not think of this movie as being in relation to it. I mean, leading up to the Oscars, us, the entertainment world, were like looking at the betting charts being like, okay, if, you know, God forbid, Francis does pass away, this movie is winning Best Picture. There's no doubt about it, because people are going to be so focused on a real life conclave, and that kind of
the betting charts. Are you listening to yourself?
It is.
Also, I get I get your point, but
and
yes,
it's played out, because this is now a movie that, as we went into the conclave, we heard that some of the cardinals were watching to get their like actual knowledge of what it's going to play out like in person.
Yeah.
And I mean, you do see the kind of the sacred aspect of it getting knocked down, the decorum, the traditionalism, the secrecy of this sort of last bastion of mystery being kind of knocked away. But I think that's something that we do see perpetually with all of our traditions. You go back to like the 20s, Leopold and Loeb, they've changed how like newspapers cover the trials, or like Ted Bundy's first ever TV covered court case. This is something that, as the ways that we communicate update into a more hyper-connected sort of world, we will always use it to focus on whatever we're focused on. And just by the nature of a very interesting and very kind of Mean Girls silly movie bisecting a new conclave, and, you know, TikTok being around, it was a perfect storm for it happening now. But I mean, it would have happened maybe the next conclave, the conclave after that.
Yeah.
We would have made a True Housewives of Conclave at some point.
Well, so like this is what's compelling to me about the fact, Angelo, that the new pope is an American pope, right? Like the idea that, you know, Robert Prevost becomes Pope Leo the 14th. There's the transition that happens. First of all, I don't think, and I genuinely mean this, I don't think I should know this much about a new pope. But the fact of the new pope's Americanness has actually created a perfect pop culture storm that says that like there's all these bits, because like America approaches these things differently, and we all kind of live in the shadow of how America covers things. But like I don't need the Pope's opinions on which Chicago baseball team I should support. That's not my business. And like the notion that we heard from the Pope's brother, oh my God, this is a sentence I'm saying out loud. The notion that I've heard from the Pope's brother that like they like to play Wordle together. And also at the same time, we know that the new Pope watched Conclave before he went into the Conclave. That's startling to me. Like that's because like that removes the mystery and places it squarely in the reality TV realm. And like I would like to take institutions that have lasted for a long time seriously, but the internet won't let me do that, and American pop culture won't let me do that. Does that overwhelm you in any kind of way, that you like can think that maybe the new pope has seen the Dave Matthews Band somewhere in Chicago, you know, in the last I don't know when? Like, does that change your perception of this institution in any kind of way?
There are a lot of firsts that sort of change our perception of the institution. We've got a pope named Bob. We've got the first pope who might credibly like hot dogs.
True.
I think it sort of it changes the institution a little bit, maybe, and maybe makes things a little bit more accessible for people. I think it's still an inaccessible institution, right? And I think the I think the fact that we're sort of looking to Conclave the film as a kind of explainer for this, shadowy institution is itself a sign that a lot of it is still enshrouded in mystery, right? Like even the fact that the cardinals themselves need to watch this movie as a kind of explainer for the rituals of voting. Like, okay, I walk up with my paper ballot and I say my oath and then I put it in the saucer and I tip it, right? Like the fact that they themselves needed to consult with the movie as a kind of how-to guide to doing the conclave, I think shows that there is still a little bit of mystery, even if some of that mystery has arguably been a little bit demystified by this pop culture fixation. I think, there's still a little bit of secrecy. We still don't really know how the votes shake down. We still don't know what happens between those different plumes of smoke. Even if, the movie Conclave tells us that these are people who are kind of catty behind closed doors, and they're photocopying mean documents about each other, and they're secretly having little Nespressos in their private apartments. Like, sure, that demystifies the process a little bit, but some of it is going to remain a mystery, I think.
Ellen, I'm one of the other things I've been really taken by is like that account on Twitter called Pope Crave, which is like a sort of a play on Pop Crave, the social media sort of site to get all your pop culture news. There is a popification, a pop cultureification of the church that happened overwhelmingly fast with this one conclave, and then you add this dimension, right, of the idea of an American pope that just allows you to use all those Americanisms to sort of explain away how one becomes pope. How do you think that changes your relationship with how you see the institution?
I think that the memes are going to continue to be excellent, and they're going to really rib Chicago in particular. Yes. I was seeing so many references yesterday to deep dish and hot dogs and arguments until it was finally settled by his brother whether this new pope is a Cubs or a White Sox fan. So I think that we're going to continue to see some things about him and learn about him, like while making fun of the United States. I would guess that a lot of the memes will come out of the United States, but it's I think a delight to see people be engaged with any spiritual leader. It's just so strange and unusual in this day. And also it's sort of a nice distraction from, I think, a lot of what Americans are concerned about right now, to be watching the Pope and to have a sort of similar approach to how we enter the conclave to how we entered the American election. I'm American, but the sort of Tim Walz treatment of Tagle, for example. I think that at least until the Pope gives people a reason not to engage in this way, it's going to continue to be a source of sort of delight and distraction.
But Ellen, if you just walk with me down this road for a moment, I've been trying to be careful about what happens when you treat serious things in a silly way and then also treat silly things in a silly way. And I'm trying to be careful with it because I've seen how that plays out in politics, and that concerns me, I think, sometimes. And when you look at all of this and the idea that there's all this TikTok activity around the Pope, and all of these memes are sort of like, comparing Conclave to a reality show, but then also the deep dish memes and all those things. Like, does that make you feel like, okay, this will make younger people who are engaged in this conversation and all the social media activity more interested in the conversation about religion? Or does it kind of just register as just another, Bama Rush or cruise stock? Like, does that sort of like register you as like maybe an ephemeral social media trend and then people are going to move on? Or does it meaningfully end up opening the way to be like, okay, you know what? This is a serious institution. It has a history. Let me ask some questions about it. Where do you land on that?
I think that it's probably not going to meaningfully bring people into Catholic churches from younger generations. I think that if those people do enter Catholic churches, I think that they're probably not the ones making the memes. So I think it's
That's
probably
true.
outsiders who are trying to be insiders in a very insider institution. But I also, I don't know. I think that people have their eye on the relationship between an American pope and another, major American power player who might be threatened by a powerful American, perhaps more powerful than he, who I'm not going to name. But I think people will be interested in that relationship, and so that I think positions the Pope in a brand new way. I don't think the Vatican is thinking about making the conclave particularly. Well, I don't think the Vatican is worried about an American pope. I think they're positioning him as a pope from the Americas. He's the second pope from the Americas is how they're thinking of him.
Yeah.
So, I guess we'll see how he plays out. I mean, he's also Peruvian, according to Peruvians. So.
Yeah. If folks are just joining us, my name is Elamin Abdulmahmoud, and this show is called Commotion. Angela Moretta is here. Ellen O'Connell Widdett is here, and Jackson Weaver is here. And look, I'd like to pivot to something that is a bit... No, it's completely unrelated to all this conclave mania. Let's listen to this.
Liri lì, lari là, elefante nel deserto che cammina qua e là. Con la sua conchiglia e un orologio che fa tic-tac, le spine del cactus mi fanno un attacco flashback. Arriva zio Ramon su una mongolfiera blu, gridando.
I mean, look, if you're wondering what did I just hear, you're not the only one. I'm there with you.
What?
That is it is a sampling of this online phenomenon that I wish didn't exist. That is dubbed Italian brain rot. Jackson, every time the word brain rot is involved, we call you in. It's like your bat signal. What is Italian brain rot?
I mean, brain rot in general is the idea of being entertained by something that rots your brain intentionally.
Yeah.
So this is the opposite of intellectual stimulation. Italian brain rot is basically just that. You have nonsense Dadaist sort of visuals paired with foreign-ish sounding words. We heard those. If you speak Italian, you know those are not Italian words. Yeah. They're Italian-ish sounding, and if you were able to see a screen, you would see a cappuccino-headed lady pouring coffee into another cup, or a shark wearing shoes, or something else.
Real words that you're saying, Vlad. Those are real words.
AI dreamscape nonsense, and you're watching it kind of as the joke being, isn't it funny that I'm able to be entertained by something so intentionally nonsensical with no depth, no meaning? There's no twist here. There's nothing to mine from it. This is an anti-joke in AI form.
So the appeal is literally like, isn't it silly that I find this appealing?
Isn't it silly that this is where society is?
Great. I feel so good about this. Angelo, how do you feel when you see your culture being used as meme fodder like this, pal?
I won't go so far as rehashing the bit from The Sopranos where Silvio hears they're going to protest the Columbus Day Parade and he says, it's anti-Italian discrimination.
You just did, but it's great.
I just did.
Yeah.
I evoked it. I don't think it's exactly anti-Italian discrimination, although I'm sure Silvio would say it is. But there's definitely a kind of fetishism of the apparent, absurdity of sing-songy Italian names that end in vowels and that rhyme from ballerina cappuccina to bombardillo crocodilo, which I did have to write down because otherwise I wouldn't remember I'm also reminded of the meme, you can always do an Italian accent, it's never racist meme, yes. Where it kind of feels to me like what's going on is, making fun of or indulging in Italian burlesque or satire is some kind of crucible, some kind of test case for acceptable meme fodder that's offensive but not too offensive, right? Like Italian culture is foreign and strange enough, as we've seen with the Cardinals, that it lends itself to the absurd, but it's, as a culture, it's wide enough that you don't have to feel too bad for
You're allowed to
taking
do
license.
the Italian hand still.
Exactly. You can do the hands, which I've been doing throughout this session. Yeah.
All three of you have now done it. I refuse. I'm going to sit that one out. And Ellen, do you see this and go like, okay, this is mostly harmless. Please don't worry about this. Because I'm tired of deciding whether something is harmful or harmless. And so please, I'm deferring to you and go like, this is not a problem. Or maybe a bit of a problem. What do you think?
Well, I came to it for this segment, so I don't have a I don't have an extensive background in Italian brain rot.
Thank you
Had
for
to do a
typing
crash
the
course,
words
but
Italian brain rot into Google. I appreciate you doing that.
yeah. But I'm seeing some stuff online about how people are using it for maybe Islamophobic messaging, and there's concern over the way it's depicting Gaza. Like you can see Ballerina Cappuccina, that character pirouetting through a war zone, and I just find it so
God.
strange. And also, like, I'm probably too old to really have an opinion on this.
I do wish that we would never say the words ballerina cappuccino ever again in my life.
Yeah.
The fact that we've had to say it this many times, I'm in distress this show, you guys. That's what's happening. The whole entire conversation is just me being distressed in several ways. Okay, I want to circle back to a story that we covered a few days on Commotion. Have a listen to this.
Black pen and aim, got bodies like Rambo. Rest in peace, please light up a candle. This the life of a vandal, messed up, and I'm still in some lean. Deciding crime, so it wouldn't be me. Diamond shining.
Designer crimes or it wouldn't be me. Okay, all right, listen. That is Blackpink, and that song is called Pink Venom. You got Lisa. She's rapping right there. And on Tuesday on the show, we talked about all the looks at this year's Met Gala. And Lisa, who showed up, received a lot of criticism for this outfit that some people saw as disrespectful. They said that the face of Rosa Parks was stitched into Lisa's underwear. That's a sentence that I never thought I'd have to say twice on air, but I have now this week. But we said it. We said it right here on Commotion. We talked about this because that was all the conversation that was online. Turns out, not true. I don't feel good telling you that, but it was not true at all. I represented for the designer Henry Taylor, who created the piece that Lisa was wearing with Pharrell. He said that the faces embroidered into the outfit were people from Taylor's personal life. It was his neighbor, he says, not Rosa Parks. And I want to revisit the story because I think both to just kind of set the record straight and say, sorry for the misinformation, that's on me. But also, I think it's a reflection on how easily misinformation can sort of spread around because one person sees it and goes, I think that's Lisa. I think that's Rosa Parks on Lisa's underwear. Then suddenly becomes the conversation. Jackson, what do you make of the fact that this story traveled so quickly?
I mean, I think this is, for us specifically as an audience, such a good test case of journalism best practices. Mm-hmm. There are so many things that you will not key in as something that might be duplicitous or might be a fact that needs to even be checked that you do. I remember way back, remember the Will Smith slap thing?
Yeah.
Remember when we were in this building watching it and that slap happened, it took us so long to figure out, is this real? Is this a sketch? Yeah. What is going on? Or even more recently with Kanye West and Bianca showing up at the Grammys and not sure, did they get kicked out or they were
invited? Did they leave? Yeah.
It's so easy to spread rumor as you would do in a normal dinner conversation. But when it comes to reporting facts, this is something that can easily spiral out of control. And for this occasion, it looks like this is Rosa Parks, and also some of the backstory of this woman who has used the N-word in the past, has spoken, has used the N-word in the past, has used AAVE kind of mockingly in the past. It fits a narrative, and it makes sense for you to believe, well, this is a continuation of this pattern. And when you have misinformation that feeds your already inborn assumptions, you are much more likely to believe it. Yeah. So I think this is it's not the most egregious misstep that has ever occurred in the world of journalism, but I think it does, speak to how easy it is for something that is completely not true to suddenly become truth.
Ellen, last word to you on this. When you see a story like this one, what are some of the lessons we can take away from the fact that it just traveled so fast?
Well, I was thinking when I saw this that it reminded me of some of my student essays that I worry about in my university class that I teach, and how AI can just present something as though it's true as soon as it exists online.
Right.
So it's often incorrect, and I think that AI sort of raises the stakes on us not being publicly wrong, because it can show up in all sorts of writing afterwards. So. I guess fact check ourselves, and I wish there were more safeguards around that.
Yeah, I was just really struck by how quickly that story can end up traveling, and I think the idea that it just kind of became the talk of the internet, and then just a couple of days later, because it takes longer to correct misinformation than it does for misinformation to spread. So first of all, I just want to own our part and be like, well, that's on us for adding to that snowball. I got to leave it there, you guys, but I also really appreciate your time. Thank you so much for being on the show. This has been a delight. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
Yes, of course. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Angela Moretta is a freelance film critic in Toronto. Jackson Weaver is a senior writer for CBC Entertainment News, also in Toronto. And Ellen O'Connell-Whittet teaches writing at UC Santa Barbara and contributes to The Cut. That is it for the podcast today. This show is produced by Stuart Berman, Ty Callender, Gene Kim, Jane Van Couverden, and Jess Lowe. Our digital producers are Carla Antonio, Amelia Ekbal, Shuli Grossman-Gray, Shel Turingen, and Julia Whalen. Our director is Daniel Grogan. Our engineers this week are Gabby Hagorillas and Sam Hashmi. The senior producer of the show is John Perry. Our executive producer is Beza Seifa. My name is Alamin Abdul Mahmoud. We are going to be back on Monday. On that show, we're going to talk about Arcade Fire, who are the musical guests for this week for SNL. They also have a new album out. And of course, there's been a lot of controversy with the Arcade Fire. So it's kind of, the band seems to be ready to move on from that controversy. But the question is, are the fans ready to do that? We will ask that question. That's on Monday's show. In the meantime, we'll see you then.